Screencast for homework 4. I'll give you a brief introduction about the architecture that I've used and all the scripts I've created, and then we'll go ahead and run my test scripts. All right, this is the repository, and I've added all the commands that need to be run, my implementation details, and all the observations in here. All right, let me move on to Sublime Text, which is like easier for me. All right, so I've got 4 separate scripts. Let's start with ratings first. It is a very simple API. It's a server on port 5000 on my local machine, and it has a route called ratings. Ideally, this should return HTML status code of 200. All right, and if it's down, this ratings would have a status code of 404. All right, now in main.js, I've implemented gateway and all the API methods. The code that I'm highlighting is the one for probabilistic assignment and redirection to the particular API. I've actually tried out 2 different probabilities. The one in the commented code is for the other one. You can find details of that in my README. In the API experiment, I have added code to actually handle errors in the rating service gracefully. So if the rating service is down, here I detect that and I send an error 500 message, internal server error. So the acceptable status responses for my code are either 200 or 500. If any other error other than these 2 statuses is like an error which is not handled in my code. That's my basic assumption. All right. Test.js is my script for uh, running the gateway API for 100 iterations. I've done tests for other number of iterations as well. You will find the details of that in my README. So this is pretty straightforward. It iterates through 100 times and then calls the gateway API and checks for the status code. I'm not interested that much in what's actually returned by the routes. I've focused more on what's the status code that's received. So anything which is either status code 200 or 500 is a success for my experiment. All right. I've created a folder called output, and it has all the results of my experiments. And I've actually followed a naming convention for the file. You can find the details of that in my README file. All right. Finally, I've created a test for checking automatically whether failures in the rating service will be handled automatically, handled gracefully, I mean. All right, so for that, what I'm doing is for all the API routes, API control, API experiment, etc. I'm checking the status code of the URLs when the rating service is up and when it's down. All right. So in my code, if I go back to main.js and tell you and show you, only API experiment has the part to handle failures in rating service gracefully. So that's why I've commented these 2 out, API and API control. So the rest of them will pass, and later I'll show you that when I uncomment this and I run it, it'll cause failures, right? So that's one way of checking whether my code handles failures automatically. All right, let me open up a terminal and start the main.js server, and I'll start the rating server as well. Yeah, now let me just go back to my browser and open this URL. This should redirect to the API and internally redirect to ratings. So let me open up API directly, it should redirect to ratings as well. So I'm showing that internally it gets data from the ratings route and displays it in the API. If I do API control, it should provide a similar one. It should be 4000 slash, my bad. And the same with API underscore experiment. All right. It says the rating service is down and it throws a 500 error. All right. Um, yeah. Now let me show you my test code. So if I run node test.js first, it'll run through the 100 iterations. Oh, in this case, it called the API experiment feature once. Yeah, I think I got lucky here because all the other times I didn't get it. And you will see that the output in my repo does not have this. Yeah, everything's like 200 okay in that. All right, so this is pretty straightforward. I've included all my observations in my README. The next thing I want to show you is the automated test. So right now I'm running this for 4 different sets of configuration, which is API control, and API experiment for different values of API of rating service up and down. All right, so you'll notice that all of these pass because these I've added code in them to like handle all these stuff gracefully. But if I uncomment the part to check for API with rating service down, it, I mean, let me uncomment both of these in fact. So this doesn't have code to like handle the failures gracefully. So if I run this again, you'll see that there'll be a couple of failures thrown on the page. So this script can be used to like detect uh, if if the code handles all failures gracefully and stuff. So all we need to do is check for the failed keyword on console output and then do some action accordingly. All right, so that's it from my end. As I told you, I've added more details in my README. Do let me know if you have any more questions. Thanks.